just think for a second, what are two things that Steve Jobs and Jay-Z have in common? Well, for one, they're both wildly successful in their own industries. Secondly, they both overcame really extreme circumstances to get there. Now, that's important for me because I can remember a time where I'm sitting here getting ready to go into high school, and two teachers tell me that I should drop out and I'm not going to amount to anything in life. Maybe if you would have seen my report card back then, you probably would have agreed. But I need to give you some context for that situation, though. You see, grades weren't that important for me because I was living in an atmosphere where all I cared about was trying to make it home from school without getting jumped or robbed. Especially when you're just trying to, buy some pizza the next day at school, right? I need to keep all my change. And if anything, I'm here worried about, what am I going to have for dinner? And maybe will I be able to buy a new pair of Nikes, on the weekend? And these are the things that matter to me. I wasn't thinking about what college I'm going to go to. I wasn't thinking, is my GPA where it should be? As a matter of fact, most people that I grew up around weren't thinking any of those things. Now, fast forward. Let's take you to my spring semester, senior year in college. I'm sitting here with several job offers from some of the top corporate and investment banks in the world. The reason that I got there, though, didn't have anything to do with just I came from the ideal background or that I was the cookie-cutter candidate that most of these firms are looking for. It had to do with what I learned from these successful people. It had to do with the very specific techniques and intricate steps that they did in their lives, which put them in a position to use their circumstances for their advantage. The three things that I took, I think that were very impactful for me, had to do with, first of all, your perspective. The other piece has to do with your story. And then finally, it has to do with your brand. Now, growing up, I've been a big fan of movies and how the story just unfolds. You're sitting here, you just like the drama, you're seeing how, the main character has to overcome something difficult in order to finally defy all the odds and make it to the top. And I'm here thinking, one day when I'm sitting here, with no future ahead of me, I'm like, man, that's really cool. What if I can do that? What if maybe one day somehow that can be me? And that was, I think, something that was very powerful and that I use now in order to teach many other young students and young professionals who are trying to break into their desired career fields. And I try to give them these 3 steps and strategies in order to apply for their own lives. See, everyone comes back from different circumstances and different backgrounds, but every single one of those things can be used in your favor, only if you let it, though. Now, what do I mean? Let's start off with perspective. Perspective is an interesting thing because it can kill you or it can make you the most successful person in the room, right? Let me break that down for you. See, I went and I was looking at my life now when I was applying for jobs, right? Every college student is here dreading the day that they're going to have to send in those applications thinking, geez, am I going to have a job? Will I be employed? Am I going to get mad at my university? Right? I mean, there's a lot of things that go through your mind that make you wonder, what does this mean for me? Does my success after school, does my job define who I'm going to be? And many people seem to think so, right? I certainly did. I remember being in those shoes and just thinking, if I don't get a job, I mean, what am I? I mean, I'm going to have nothing. I'm not going to have money. I'm going to have maybe some student loans. It's going to be a chaotic scene. So it's a natural stress. Everyone goes through it. But the question then becomes, are you looking at it correctly? Let me give you a bit of background on getting into the corporate and investment banking industry. See, they're very well known for recruiting candidates who fit the following mold. Top university, excellent GPA. They've had previous internships already at at all of these top firms. And they all come from a banking background or a finance background as far as their major and specialty is concerned. Now, I'm here wanting to do the same thing, right? I'm like, yeah, it's easy, you just apply. But the more I started learning about the industry, the more I realized, geez, I don't fit this mold, right? This isn't me. And who am I? This is what I saw. This was my perspective of myself. I'm a first-generation college student who doesn't have the best grades, who is also who is coming from a background where I didn't have an internship previously that matched the mold of what they were looking for. And on top of that, I'm a philosophy major. Now, that's not a knock on philosophy majors, but I'm pretty sure we can all assume that you're not going to see these corporate and investment banks knocking on the philosophy department's door asking, what are your best students, right? So I feel like I have everything stacked against me. And as a result, I'm already beginning to discredit myself. And this is something that I see most students do when they approach me for advice, right? Because now that they've seen that I've gotten into these firms, they said, can you help me? And I ask, sure. What do you think? What do you want to do? And they tell me, I want to get into banking. I want to get into finance, and this, and that. And I say, okay, great. What do you think is stopping you? Well, I don't really qualify. See, I don't come from this background, or I didn't have this grade, or I didn't go to this networking event, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you name the reasons. Everyone's always going to find a reason as to why they can't do something. So the most interesting thing that happened with me was I just paused for a second and I looked, if all of these successful people are doing something, even despite their circumstances that are telling them you're going to fail or you're going to amount to nothing, what did they do differently? So, well, for one, let's take my background. You see, again, first-generation college student, and I didn't have an internship previously. There's a good reason for that. You see, I was working full-time to pay for college. And if you think about it, that's something that shows that you can be a candidate that is ready to work very hard for what you want to do. Now, I also maybe didn't have the best grades, but it's because I'm having to work full-time. Not just work full-time, but I'm also having to do another side hustle with an online business. I'm doing whatever I can do to make sure that I can graduate, right? Actually attend my classes and, leave with a degree and hopefully with a job, right? So that's that kind of area where you're feeling stuck, but it can be used to your advantage because I showed that I can grind. And I try to do the same thing with many students. One recently approached me last week. He contacted me asking, can I speak with you? I'd love to work in finance. Can I have a chat with you? I said, sure. So he comes up, we get together, and I said, tell me about yourself. Oh, well, I'm a student here, but you see, I've come from an international background. I'm Korean, and I don't think that firms are necessarily going to like me because of my background in Korea. I said, why not? Well, they're not in the best state economically at the moment. And I said, well, I mean, what is, so you're already assuming that you're not going to qualify because you are blaming your country's economy on your success and how they're going to perceive you. I mean, it seems pretty silly, but at the same time, if you can recognize what's happening, we all do that to ourselves, don't we? We all just take the worst and try to say, this is me, and this is what's going to define what I'm going to turn out as. So I said, no, it's because you're international that gives you something unique. So you bring an interesting value proposition to finance. Many firms, especially the largest ones, are all international. They're all going to value somebody who's bringing a different perspective. It doesn't matter what the current state of your economy is because, as you can see, the United States wasn't in the best economic state 8 or 10 years ago now. But if that was what they were going to define us by in your candidacy, geez, nobody here would have a job at any of these firms, right? So obviously the light bulb clicked, and he decided, yeah, this is true. It's an interesting point. And he suddenly looked at everything about himself completely differently. Perspective, it can make the world of difference, right? Now, the next piece is about your story. See, I'm a big fan of movies and telling your story. Because, again, we're going back to the main character. What is it that makes him unique, him or her unique? They are going through something that is typically not overcome, right? And it's going through a hardship. So you think, wow, when I'm going through a hard time in life, what am I experiencing at the moment? And I'm experiencing that moment in my movie. This is that piece that's going to be my turning point, and I'm going to eventually overcome it, and I'm going to turn into a great story, this bad situation. But it's all about how you deliver it, though. You can't just go through a bad situation, overcome it, and expect that people are going to buy it. What do I mean by that? I'm going to give you a very short story. There was a kid who he was disabled. Didn't really get along with his dad too well, and he kind of wanted to branch off into the world. He realized, it was a bit rough out there, and maybe I should just come home. So he came home, and him and his dad made up. That's the story. Might not seem so interesting at first, right? But what if I told you that was a plot to Finding Nemo? Everything changes, right? It's completely different, and what matters is how you tell your story. You see, so when I was in the position now of trying to apply for jobs, I needed to come up with a story that would be able to emphasize those points and not just change my perspective to make it positive, but at the same time, let someone know who I am because of that story and what happened and what led me to that place. And I started doing that. But the interesting thing is, see, once you reshape your perspective and then you start telling your story, you start making that your default of who you are. See, it actually becomes what you identify as, and you're no longer a product of your circumstance. Rather, you are something that has excelled through your circumstances. And those situations that seem so bad at one point suddenly are what become your strengths. Those are the things that become your unique value proposition. So when I was in this position and I start telling my story, I go to networking events, I go to interviews, I start meeting people just in passing. I start telling this story so much that therefore it starts becoming who I am. And when I realize this is becoming actually who I am, I'm no longer thinking I don't qualify, I don't belong. I start thinking, well, of course I belong. And these are the reasons why. This is my story. This is what I did in order to put me in this place to rise up and be an excellent candidate for your job, sir. So what happens after that is, I think, the final touch, right? This is going to be about your brand. Everyone knows famous brands, and we think when we see Coca-Cola, when we see TED, when we see any of these labels on the products you're using, on the clothes you're wearing, you know that that brand is something that holds value. It's something that is significant, and it tells a story, right? You need to treat yourself as your brand. See, I remember at first when I came on campus, people would look at me and they might think, oh, this is some kid who, he came from some rough background, isn't in the business school, I don't know what he's going to do. There was nothing that they took from meeting me. But see, as time went by, I made a decision, I made a choice to start creating a brand about myself. What did I want that brand to say? I wanted that brand to say that he's professional. He's somebody who, if you work with him, he will be an excellent team player. That's somebody who, when you work with him, they're going to be part of an amazing team and help you all excel together. See, I made a choice to start building this character about me. And even more so, I then made a choice to start making myself a person who can be a resource for those that need advice on getting to the next step in their careers. This became something that I was passionate about, and it now became something that everyone else knew about who I was. So if I were to wrap it up and take it full circle, I started off being some kid in the street who his teachers told wouldn't amount to anything. And then I ended up, having the chance to work at some of the most prestigious firms in the world and be able to give back now to so many other students and young professionals who are in the same shoes that I previously was in. And that's something that I take very seriously, and because of where I know I came from and because of the difficulty that it was to take those bad situations and turn it into something amazing. And that's why I devote myself to today. And I think the important takeaway from this is that, you know, your past doesn't have to define who you are later on. Or as many of you will hear, if you look into finance and you're trying to value a company, past performance doesn't always indicate future results. Thank you.